Thanks for tuning into No Wine in No Time. I'm your host Dave, and today we're talking about sparkling wine, and of course the king of all sparkling wine, and that's champagne. In the U.S., sparkling wine is reserved for celebrations. So when we think about a champagne toast, to mark a special anniversary or a special birthday, people bring out the bubbly. But when we start to think about other parts of the world, champagne and sparkling wines are a little bit more mainstream. And that's for one reason and one reason only. That's their incredible flexibility. When we think about sparkling wines, they pair so well with so many different types of foods. So in discussing sparkling wines, let's first understand that not all sparkling wines are champagne. Champagne is a region in France, and the sparkling wines that come from that region are called champagne. Everything else is called sparkling wines. And I think you're going to say, well, Dave, I know I've been in my local wine store and I see American champagne or California champagne. The reason for that is really twofold. It's been grandfathered in that the U.S. can use the word champagne, and quite frankly, the U.S. does things with labeling that other countries would not dare to do. So that's why you see the word champagne next to American or Californian on a bottle of domestic sparkling wine. So let's talk about some of the families of sparkling wine, where they come from, and how they were made. The first one let's think about is Italian, and it's a sparkling wine called Prosecco. So Prosecco comes from the northeastern part of Italy. It comes from one grape and one grape only, and that's a grape called Glera, G-L-E-R-A. Now, Prosecco generally personifies some apple and pear type flavors, and what's different about Prosecco is it's generally made in what they call a in a tank format. It's fermented in bulk, and the bubbles are made in that tank. They actually call that method Charmant. So if you ever hear Charmant method, that actually means tank fermented and the bubbles result from the tank. That's different than what we'll see when we talk about some of the other sparkling wines. So moving from Italy over to Spain, Spain has a wine that they call cava. So if you ever see cava, that's the sparkling wine from Spain. Now cava is generally a blend of three different grapes: Parellada, Xarello, and Macabeo. Now when those three grapes get together, they create just a little bit more complexity than what we get from Prosecco. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Prosecco, it's just a little bit one-dimensional and it lacks a little bit of depth and character. So cava steps up just another notch on that scale, and cava has a little bit more complexity. Now most cava is done in the traditional method, where the secondary fermentation is actually done in the bottle itself, and the bubbles are produced in the bottle itself, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we talk about champagne. So I had mentioned that champagne is the king of all sparkling wines, and there's a reason for that. Not only does champagne only come from one region around the world, Champagne, France, but it also has great complexity. So when we think about the grapes that are authorized to be used in champagne, there are three. Two of them are red, and one of them is white. Now I know we've all seen rosé champagne, and we've seen white champagne. Actually, those red grapes can be used in the white champagne, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. So there's two different types of champagne. So once we get into champagne, it's going to deviate off into two different directions. The first one is one we call Blanc de Blancs. So Blanc de Blancs is white from white. So we think about champagne, champagne being very clear, straw yellow, a white wine with bubbles in it. That is derived from white grapes. So if we see Blanc de Blancs on a champagne bottle, that means white from white, and it will be 100% Chardonnay. Now, the other way we can head is one that's Blanc de Noirs. Blanc de Noirs, like Pinot Noir, and the grapes that are used in that are actually Pinot Meunier and Pinot Noir. And we could also have a little bit, but a minority share of Chardonnay in there as well. So that's quite interesting. So how do we get white wine from red grapes? Well, what happens is when we make champagne, we actually are crushing the grapes very, very softly. So just a little bit of juice bleeds out. And about the first 20% of the press comes out crystal clear, and that's what's used in champagne. So that's one thing that makes champagne great. Also, there's various classifications of champagne. One is called Grand Cru, and that means only about 5% of all the grapes in a given region or a given area are good enough to be a Grand Cru wine. Then the second level is one called Premier Cru. It's actually kind of spelled premier, but pronounced Premier. And Premier Cru would be the next 15% of the grapes. So really the top 20% of all the grapes in the region can be Grand Cru or Premier Cru. So that's fascinating, and that's one thing that makes champagne different. Also, there's something called a dosage level. So let's talk about how champagne's made. So when we get into a specific champagne house, they may have Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, Pinot Noir in various vintages, in various holding tanks. Some may be in oak, some may be in stainless steel, some may be in cement. They take some of their best vintages and blend them back together. Now, here's where the magic happens. This wine is still at this point, in other words, no bubbles in the wine. They actually top off the bottle with a little bit of fresh wine or fresh juice and add a little bit of yeast. Well, the yeast then starts to begin to eat the sugar in the wine itself, the new wine, and convert that to alcohol. Well, guess what? When sugar is eaten and converted to alcohol by yeast, carbon dioxide is the byproduct. If we keep our bottle sealed, then that carbon dioxide has nowhere to go but to populate the entire beverage itself. Now, the French use a specific A-frame rack and a method that they call méthode champenoise, which means fermented in the bottle. So what happens in méthode champenoise is they take and put the wine at a 45 degree, and every so often they move it up a technique called riddling until the wine is at a 90-degree angle. So at that point, all the dead yeast cells move down into the neck of the bottle of wine, and they take and dip that very quickly into a icy salt solution, which freezes the neck, pops the yeast out, and then they can put a cork and a cage on for final distribution. So as you can see, this is an incredibly complex procedure, and that's why champagne really is the king of sparkling wines. Now, I have a special champagne to try today. This is from a vintner by the name of Moutard, and this is their Grand Cuvée done in a brut style. So, when we think about dryness in champagne, we have demi-sec, which is a little bit sweet, sec, which is dry, we have extra dry, brut, extra brut, and then brut nature. Now that's a whole lot to remember, but that actually shows from sweetest to driest. So this is brut. This is somewhere in the middle or a little bit closer to the dry end. So let's go ahead and open this bottle of champagne. And to do that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 turns. So if you're ever in a quiz show, 6 turns opens any cage on champagne. Now what happens is we're met with a cork, and what I always say is just twist it slightly, and you get that beautiful sound when champagne is being liberated. Now, what happens if we pop the cork and champagne starts to come out? Maybe we jiggled the bottle. All you have to do is hold the bottle at a 45-degree angle, and that eruption will stop. So I have 2 different glasses. This is a traditional coupe glass, which is very traditional for champagne, and this is a flute. So what we're going to do is go ahead and pour a little bit of champagne in both. And we're going to go ahead and give this a little sniff and a sip. And of course, since I like you guys, I'm going to go ahead and give you this one. Enjoy that, and I'm going to enjoy this one. So when we look at champagne, the first thing we notice is the mousse, or the bubbles. It has very fine bubbles. And that's one thing that's different about Champagne compared to Prosecco or Cava, is the bubbles in Champagne is very, very thin. We do not swirl Champagne to liberate the aromas. We just give a little sniff. And we notice we smell a little bit of, I'm going to say lemon rind, a little bit of green apple, and a little bit of brioche, a little bit of breadiness to this. And that probably comes from all the time on the yeast. This particular Champagne is actually made from Pinot Noir. So this is a Blanc de Noirs. Let's give it a little sip. The first thing you'll notice is the explosive nature. Champagne expands very quickly across the palate. And because of the bubbles and the beautiful acidity, it actually cleanses the palate quite quickly. I'm tasting apples, a little bit of pear type of flavors, but this buttery, fresh baked bread component in the background that really makes it quite special. So, I just want to leave you with this fact, that sparkling wines are not just for celebrations, and they should be enjoyed on a more regular basis. So I'm going to enjoy this Moutard Grand Cuvée, and I want to thank you for tuning in, and please tune in next time, and soon you'll know wine in no time.